Two.
Hey, all right. Welcome everybody to Rock and Roll Shin-Soo. My name is Gabe Estel. I'm here with my good buddy Jonathan Getz and my good buddy and my own flesh and blood Dennis Levi Leach. Good to see you, boys.
Nice to see you.
Yeah.
How are you?
Good.
Good. Good. Well, thanks for tuning in to episode 2. One thing I want to do before we get into tonight's topics, I made an error last week. So if we could have such a thing as an error report, you could chalk up one for me. I shouldn't say last week, during our first episode. I cited the Sex Pistols guitarist as Paul Cook, when that is not the case. Paul Cook is the drummer, or was the drummer for the Sex Pistols. Steve Jones is the guitarist. So I was complimenting Paul Cook for an instrument he didn't play. So I meant Steve Jones. So
We'll let it slide this time, Gabe.
right,
Yes.
I know. Just it gnawed at me because it was one of those things I realized it right after we got done recording.
Yeah.
I was like, oh shit, that's not Paul Cook doesn't play guitar.
Slap
for
on the
them.
wrist.
So anyway, yeah, I know. Right.
Dude, John Bonham shredded in Zeppelin.
Right. All right. So we've got three items on the agenda tonight. The first one was provoked by a quote by one of the best baseball players, really, of the last 40 years, I guess, if not longer. I don't know when he started. Mike Schmidt from the Phillies said that he favored a digital strike zone, or the idea of a digital strike zone. So meaning, if I'm not mistaken, that a computer would call balls and strikes. That wouldn't be left to a human umpire. He said the umpires could still be around. They could call foul balls, and they would certainly call call the plays at the bases. But you could leave the strike zone up to the computer with a clearly defined digital zone. So I wanted to gather your thoughts on that. Actually, I'm going to kick it to Jonathan first on it. Then we'll go to Levi, and then I'll come around and talk about my opinions on it as well. So, Jonathan,
Sure.
You're leading off.
All right, excellent. So, yeah, I mean, this is something that I've been thinking ever since they started showing the 3x3 grid on television broadcasts. And it seems like something's missing when that's not there nowadays. When you're watching a game on TV and you see the pitch is made, you expect to see it show up in the lower right hand corner and see where that was placed, and you kind of take that as gospel. But you can only do that so much, obviously. And actually, I feel like that they could tweak that a little bit to reflect what the umpire's been calling and not just necessarily what they think is the strike zone. But anyway, so the technology is obviously there, and I think in most stadiums, in some stadiums, they don't have access to the straightaway center field shot, possibly, which is would be a downside potentially. But I'm a huge proponent of technology and it making our lives easier. I'm also a romantic to a limit, and as soon as it stops making sense from an efficiency and fairness standpoint, I stop being a romantic. And as a result, I think that the digital strike zone is absolutely an answer moving forward. I always like to flip it on its ear, the argument on its ear, and say, what if the digital strike zone had always like they invented it like with baseball in 1880, right? And
Right.
and 20 years ago they started proposing, no, let's put a human back there. The strike zone will be different for every human. Should we make this change? And everybody will say, no way.
Right.
Because it just wouldn't make sense. They wouldn't say no way from a romantic reason. They would say no way from just like a fairness reason. So that's how I like to look at it. And I think, yeah, and we might not be there yet. I think a lot of people would need this explained to them. It wouldn't be a force field like Mike Schmidt calls it, but it would be, something digital and more ethereal nonetheless.
Yeah. All right, interesting points. So if in summation, it sounds like yes, but not tomorrow, right?
Oh, I think
essentially,
yeah, it would just the extent of the technology would need to be kind of more open sourced, if you will. Everybody would need to know exactly how this works, and is Fox's strike zone different than ESPN's strike zone, that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I agree with you to an extent about the romanticism of it. Like, I mean, at some point, I feel like you're right where it could come to that, and my only thought is, like you mentioned there at the end, is one station strike zone going to be the same as another's? Are pitchers going to be able to know maybe where there's weak spots and somehow in the strike zone system to where they could maybe get a borderline pitch called a strike a higher percentage of the time, just depending upon the algorithm used on the strike zone itself? You know what I mean? I mean, it's digital age, cheating almost, but I mean, all things I know technology wise have a backdoor to an extent. They have a way to be worked around, I don't know if there's a lot of baseball players out there smart enough to figure out that.
Maddox is retired.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And but I do also like just the I don't know. I like sometimes the camaraderie of the umpires. Sometimes the stuff they do is ridiculous. I don't know if I could stand and just get screamed at by somebody with their face right next to me and just be like, "Yo, I'm cool, man. Everything's all right." It takes a special person, I think, to be an umpire, and yeah, I mean, I could see it going that way someday, Jonathan. I really could. I don't know how long it would be. I think it'll be interesting to see at the end of this season how they reevaluate the whole replay system.
Right.
But
which is off to a shaky start.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So someday maybe, but I don't know. I guess if they get rid of them, I'm gonna look for one of those black MLB logo hats because I always thought those umpire hats were cool looking.
They are. Those are good looking caps. They are. Oh, man, good points all around. When I first heard it, I said no because, like some of the points that Levi mentioned, even though the calls can upset me, I still found some comfort in the umpire being there behind the plate. Like maybe it's the camaraderie, or it's just, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like the human element that's still in the game, which I like. But then I realized that I think I was probably just being sentimental. It's what I know, so therefore it must be okay, or it must be the right way to go. So I was over romanticizing a bit, or I was being sentimental around umpires. That said, I'm going to lean towards yes, that we sort of buck the tradition, and I think baseball, more than the other sports, the other major sports at least, seems to be mired in tradition, more than those other sports.
Yeah, and it plods itself for that.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it seems like even though I'm speaking figuratively here, baseball sort of has it seems like old guys still control it. You know what I mean? Like they made up these rules a long time ago.
Absolutely.
And they've been kind of somewhat inflexible. They haven't been that flexible with them. Whereas other sports maybe seem to have evolved. They're not afraid to introduce new elements. For instance, this might not be the best example, but the NFL introducing the 2-point conversion,
right,
which had been around,
right,
which had been around in other football leagues,
right.
Them doing that, which I guess it's probably been around for about
It's been
10, 12 years now,
it's been about
something
15
like
years,
that.
I think. Yeah.
15 years now, right? So a while, and it's fine. Like everybody's
Right.
nobody's really protesting it anymore.
Right. And actually, they're saying maybe we should get rid of the extra point. It's gotten
Yeah,
like
just give it.
NFL
just make
fans
it a
are ready
gimme.
for they're ready for cyborg rules. They don't care.
Well, and that's
Right,
I think maybe
right.
one of the things I'm worried about the digital strike zone. I hope does not lead to zip lines across stadiums with cameras running like NFL style,
Right.
where it's like no umpires, like super zoom in close shot to the second base to see who if the guy was out, if he was safe.
Dude, it would be awesome.
Right.
It would. It's
I would
Super
I would get
Baseball
an Oculus
2020.
Rift just for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to lead towards a gradual adaptation of, or I'm sorry, a gradual adoption, excuse me,
Sure.
of um, of of digital strike zones.
Yeah. So maybe they try it in spring training.
What's that?
Maybe they try it in
yeah,
spring
yeah,
training.
Yeah, try it in spring training.
Yeah.
See what. Yeah. There's going to be pushback. I'm sure a lot of traditionalists are gonna balk at the idea.
Yeah.
But they'll get over it.
Yeah.
I mean, once something becomes a rule, people tend to get over it.
Right. Yeah. Once they start to see the benefit of it,
it doesn't matter if it's a law.
Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't. Even if it's a law, if it's a policy, beyond sports, like people typically adapt.
Yep.
And that's what they do with this.
Mm-hmm.
It would fix a problem. And sorry, there's a cat about ready to get in the way here.
Oh, it'll be cute.
It would fix. Yeah. It would fix a problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm for it. I would need to know more about how it would be implemented, but I'm for it.
Yeah.
Typically speaking, and
Cool.
it sounds like all three of us, to a certain degree, for it.
Yeah. Pretty accepting.
Yeah.
I mean, I could.
Yeah,
I could see it
maybe
being
some
there.
stronger than others, but yes.
Well, I'm put it this way. I'm mad it's not already implemented. I guess in a way.
Okay.
So.
All right. Right.
Stop wasting
Right. Whereas
Jonathan's
Levi
time.
seems to be a little more reserved on it. Right.
Jonathan needs the hour-and-a-half ball game. Give him the dead ball era where you hit 12 home runs and you led the league that year.
Dude, I'm calling Brown back, and I'm getting on the phone.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I mean your baseball game, your real life baseball games will take about as long as it takes to play a video, to play RBI. Speaking of which, I don't want to veer. I'm totally digressing here, but have you guys played the new RBI?
I haven't. It looks
RBI
promising.
4? I haven't played it
I
yet.
haven't played
No,
it
I
yet.
want to.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to when I have fewer things going on. But I'm glad.
We need
Yeah,
to
it's
put
good
a
to see
report.
that franchise back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great idea for them to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, good timing. You can get it on your phone.
Yeah.
So.
Nice.
So yeah, so that's cool. All right, good. Well, it sounds like some somewhat of a consensus was reached on that issue.
Yeah.
Now I want to talk about our second. I'm gonna shift to the second agenda item, which is really kind of sort of I think the main course of the show. Sort of I kind of call this a roar followed by a whimper. We're going to talk about players, baseball players, and bands that really burst onto the scene, found some initial success, but then shortly thereafter sort of faded into obscurity. Or at least, if they didn't fade into obscurity, they didn't really totally, reach their potential, or maybe it just all didn't come into fruition like maybe we wanted it to as fans, or maybe the critical expectations were quite high and those weren't met. But the band didn't sustain a long successful career, I think is what I'm trying to say here. And same thing with the baseball player. But before we begin, I want to talk sort of about what that means. These guys, these guys, these people, aren't bust, right? I mean, you see a lot of sports journalism and list and we're approaching the NFL draft, so you're going to see a ton of articles. And we're approaching the baseball draft too. You're going to see a ton of articles about who's the biggest bust of all time, right? But I'm not talking about a bust with these people. I'm talking about someone who really couldn't sustain success. I interpret a bust to mean that the person never achieved success, right? Like your Brian Taylors, and if you go to football, your Dan McGuire's of the world, right? I mean, like,
Yep.
just yeah, somebody, Tony Mandarich or something, the football examples are coming to mind, but baseball's got them too. So somebody that never really had success is a bust when the expectations were high. And this person isn't a wash-up either, because in order to be a wash-up, you had to achieve, I think, a high level of stardom, or somewhat of a high level of stardom, and then that fades, right? And we could all mention some players, and probably even better examples in musicians that happened to. And they're not one-hit wonders either, these bands, right? I mean, that's always kind of that's a moniker I don't like anyway, because it just, I'm not talking about like Frankie Goes to Hollywood here. You know what I mean? Somebody that's just like a one song that's going to be on a compilation that's sold on an infomercial late at night. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about somebody or some entity that couldn't sustain success. All right. They all held promise. Maybe they even all delivered for a little while, but couldn't sustain it. So, I'm going to start. I think what we're going to do, I'm going to start with baseball since we're on that, and then we'll switch over to music. So Levi, I'm going to start with you. So if you could tell me your player that
Okay.
that meets this criteria that I've just described.
I don't know if he's going to meet it to a T, but
Yeah, that's fine.
he's definitely the when this topic came, it was the first person I thought of, and I, as a Cubs fan, I have a lot of these to choose from. But it's the
I think I
biggest
see
and
where
the
this is
brightest
going.
star that burst onto the scene, that then faded away and ended up only playing parts of maybe like 8 or 9 seasons of his career. Never, I don't know if he might have only played 100 games, like 4 out of the 10 seasons he was in the league, I think. And that man is Jerome Walton, the 1989 Rookie of the
Nice.
Year
Oh,
of
yeah.
the Chicago
Oh, yeah.
Cubs.
Yes.
And that year he had 139 hits, and his OPS was 721, and his batting average was 293. So those are definitely studly numbers for a guy coming onto the scene at
That's an
that time
immediate
in
impact rookie.
1989.
I mean,
You know,
yeah.
and it just, the man had different injuries happen to him, and the Cubs at that point were they probably wouldn't have admitted it at the time in the 90s, the early 90s. The Cubs were rebuilding, even though they had gotten to the division championship that year with Jerome Walton and Ryan Sandberg and Mark Grace and all those guys that year. But he left the Cubs after 4 seasons with a 127 batting average.
What?
And that goes
92,
to
he hit
either,
127.
yeah, and like I mentioned before in the past video, I think maybe sometimes the Cubs bring up players too fast, and I think that was a time where maybe it worked for about a year, a year and maybe a half a season or something, and he either couldn't handle the pressures of the league, or he couldn't stay healthy. Like I said, he only played 100 games in 4 out of the 10 seasons, and those are almost all the seasons he was with the Cubs. But like I said, he left not even batting 130. And the what's funny is the Cubs hadn't had a Rookie of the Year since, like, at that time, I think it was like 1962, and so I took a lot of pride in 1989. I was like, "Whoa, Jerome Walton for president!" You know what I'm saying? And it was just so funny. I remember as a kid being like, not I didn't want to show my thing of cards to my buddies like 3 or 4 years later because Jerome Walton was a scrub at that point, but I had all of his rookie cards.
89 Bowman. I had the 89 Bowman.
Yeah, the 89 Bowman's a good looking card.
Oh yeah,
they almost stuck out of the card case. They were so tall.
Oh yeah,
right. Yeah, all my Bowmans would get bent up at the top.
Oh yeah,
it's just it was a cool design, but just impractical for storage.
Oh yeah. You had to go to a card show and get different bigger top loaders,
different pages. Yeah. Yeah.
If you were real serious about collecting Bowman, the Griffey from that year is a really good looking card too.
Oh yeah, because the Bowmans just have the autograph on the front.
Yep.
That's it,
correct.
And the Bowman logo in the corner.
Logo.
They have they don't have any team logos or fonts.
Yeah, they're real clean vintage looking cards.
Yep.
Right. Sorry.
Levi, you know who finished second in the Rookie of the Year voting?
Didn't get card. Yeah. Anyway.
I'm sorry. What was that,
What's
Jonathan?
that?
Dwight Smith, Chicago Cub Dwight Smith finished second in that Rookie of the Year voting.
Oh yeah. No, he would have been just another one to pick, but I think the way that it seemed like he was a stud, and then he was nothing so fast, and I should have took that as a cue that this might how it will be the rest of my life. As a Cubs fan, my favorite young players, Terrio, Fontenot, Felix
I'm not going to bring up Mark Pryor. Okay.
No, exactly, man. They managed to burn out young guys quick, or the young guys they picked either just have a track record of not being able to handle the big leagues or get injured. It's just. It's a mix of it all.
So many guys on the Cubs meet this criteria. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Because they're not bust. You know what I mean? They're a bust is someone who's a high draft pick, and never pans out.
Yeah, he got to the show and he showed that he could play with the best of them, but he showed that he could only do that for one season.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
I'm looking at the numbers too. It looks like I don't know. It must have been injuries because his at-bats, really, he didn't get a lot of – the most at-bats he ever had when he was on the Cubs was 123 at-bats.
Yeah.
So, obviously, there were some injuries there.
Yeah.
And then, it looks like he –
No, games, Gabe.
He modeled –
123 games.
What's that?
123
games. Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Jesus. Looking at the wrong column. Okay. Yeah. All right. 123 games. Excuse me. So he still missed some games, though.
Oh yeah, at the time, I wasn't as caught up into it as I now would be if I was that age watching it. But I do remember him getting injured. I want to say it was maybe the beginning or middle of that next year.
Yeah.
Yeah. He only played in 100 games the next year.
Yeah.
101 games. So yeah,
that's tough.
He modeled quite a few uniforms too after '92. Looks like. He had a decent season with the Reds in '95. Remember that was the year we switched the playoff format, and the Reds made the playoffs that year. In 95. Yeah. Yep.
Well, he's forever enshrined in a starting lineup. He can always say that.
He's immortalized there. Can't take a Rookie of the Year award away,
Nope.
True, exactly.
Nope.
Yeah, maybe that'll be another topic for another day. The Rookie of the Year curse.
Right. It's baseball's equivalent of the Heisman curse. Yeah. Excellent. All right. I had a feeling you were gonna maybe lean towards Jerome Walton. All right, Jonathan.
Well,
let it rip.
My guy finished 8th in the Rookie of the Year voting for the Red Sox, and in '91 that was. In just about 150 plate appearances, he had 11 home runs, 35 RBI, and not bad for 150 plate appearances.
Yeah, right.
The next year, his numbers were down a bit, but then the Red Sox traded this fellow who I was following. This guy, Phil Plantier.
Oh, nice.
At this age I was receiving Die Hard Red Sox Fan magazine, which was like a monthly fan rag. It was like a tabloid newspaper tabloid, right?
Yeah.
And oh man, they were hyping Phil Plantier, and I was really excited about Phil Plantier. I think it was his 91 or 92 scorecard I can envision. But I mean, when I still think of Phil Plantier, I get excited. Like, he's going to be awesome, but I forget that he hasn't played in like 15 years, right? So the Red Sox, they traded him to the Padres for like who was it here? Jose Melendez. But immediately in '93 for the Padres, he went batted 240, 34 home runs, and 100 RBI. Pretty solid year for '93.
Yeah.
But after that, it was all downhill. The next year, 18 home runs, 41 RBI, and then he had like a combined 25 home runs over the last 3 years of his career. So yeah, only played until through '97. So, getting the hot start with the Red Sox in '91, peaking in '93 with 34 home runs, 100 RBI, and then being out of the league by '98 is kind of fascinating. Played for 5 different teams. And never came close to. I guess it was at age 24 that he peaked. Phil Plantier, still get excited when I hear his name, and I don't know, maybe he's like rocking a few car dealerships out there, living up to his name.
Right. Yeah. Good choice, man. God, I haven't had a Plantier reference in ages. Well, my selection, this guy, I mean, really burst onto the scene because they're almost at a record-setting pace. I mean, the dude hit 10 home runs in 72 at bats. And that was his entry into baseball, right? So he immediately started kicking ass. And then had put together then a solid rookie season and a let's see here, a low he was never a batting average guy, but still had power number. And then within basically by his third year into the league, he was already bouncing back and forth between the majors and the minors. The guy's name is Kevin Moss. All right. Yes.
Moss,
Kevin
man.
Moss, also immortalized with a starting lineup. Yes. Also immortalized with a starting lineup figure. Jonathan, I know Jerome Walton has one. Which I'm gonna order. I'm gonna get that one. Levi, that's what you're getting for Christmas. If they have a Phil Plantier starting lineup,
dude. Well, who else would they have chosen from the Padres? I'll look it up.
Right, yeah, because that was the Ken Caminetti era. So they had some good. That was the year the Padres won the World Series in '96 when he was probably playing with them. Is my guess. Anyway, so Kevin Moss, like I said, never a batting average guy. He was a power hitter, and he's well known for breaking that home run record. It was the fewest, the first person to reach 10 home runs and the fewest at bats, fewest big league at bats. That's the record. And by the end of the year, and he played his rookie year was in '90. He played in 79 games. So in 79 games, he hit 21 home runs. So, and hit 250. So that was good enough to get him second place Rookie of the Year. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, if you do the math, right? If like the guy would have played a full season.
Yeah, if he played
he
20 more games, he would have won Rookie of the Year probably.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sandy Alomar Jr. got it that
Wow.
year, which when I heard that Sandy Alomar Jr. Rookie of the Year in 1990, I thought Sandy Alomar Jr. started playing in like 1985, but I'm totally wrong about that. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Doesn't he seem like a dude that started playing way before 1990?
Yes, he does.
What's great is if you go back and look at some of the Roberto Alomar like rookie cards, he's got like the best Pablo Escobar stash.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like I was thumbing through some cards the other day to find my card for the reveal on the show tonight, and I came across numerous Roberto Alomar just like killer coke dealer mustache.
Levi's got the Upper Deck limited edition where Roberto Alomar has some coke on a knife.
Oh yeah,
it's right up here.
He's sitting on the bench next to Frank Thomas. Frank Thomas is giving the finger.
Right. Yes, I remember that card. Dude. Yes. Oh man, good stuff. Good stuff. So I chose Kevin Moss. He 4 years with the Yankees. 95, he comes back and plays 22 games with the Twins. And that's it. That closes the book on Kevin Moss's brief career. But he broke a record, and he got a starting lineup. So
wow. Yeah, 4 years, man. That's short.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
plus,
those games, I mean, what you would constitute a full season would be just his second year in the league. He had already started dropping off quite a bit within the third season.
Wow.
So, yeah. So it was a pretty precipitous decline.
Good
Cool
selections, everybody.
Yeah,
well done.
yeah,
Well done.
definitely, yeah, absolutely.
I'll be on the lookout for a Plantier jersey, Jonathan. If I find one, I'm gonna priority mail that.
So apparently he's the Padres hitting coach now, so he's doing all right for himself.
Oh, that's
Hey, he's still in the game.
He's still in the game. That's a good gig. Yeah, definitely. Well, on that note, the other side of this show being music, with bands, this took me a little bit longer to come up with my selection because
this was hard.
I'll start this one.
Please.
What's that?
I said this was hard.
Yeah, this is really hard. I'll start with this one, and then we'll go to Levi, and then Jonathan can bring it home. With this one, I struggled a bit at first because one of the rules that when we were planning this episode, one of the sort of caveats was, it couldn't be related to a death because that would just be too easy. Like when I give this criteria that I stated earlier in the show, and you apply it to bands, most people will think of, Jimi Hendrix, right? He was 27. Janis Joplin.
What has Buddy Holly done lately?
Sublime.
Right, exactly. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about somebody that OD'd, and was like really famous. No, this is more of a band that had a great release or two, maybe a couple albums. And then it never just materialized after that for whatever reason. And the band that I selected, I'll talk about one of the records in particular that I like, is The Call. The band is The Call. And it was led by this guy by the name of Michael Bean, who actually did some acting too. Michael Bean he passed away a few years ago, but Michael Bean was kind of a sort of a B-list actor too. He did some acting in the 90s in between sort of when The Call was kind of on. So I chose The Call because they really reflect a sound they produce a sound that I've been drawn to a lot lately. I found myself listening to more bands from the 80s, and I think I'm enjoying it so much that I don't think it has a very to me it doesn't have an 80s sound anymore. It just has a good sound, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
When if you were to ask me like 10 years ago what I think Flock of Seagulls sounds like, I'd be like, oh, I think it sounds like shit for the most part, you know. Now I kind of like that sound. Maybe it's just because some bands have revived it a little bit, but to me, The Call was sort of like the best band of the crop of '80s bands. A lot of them were from England or Ireland, and there are some sort of socially conscious lyrics, and as well as some spiritual themes. You know, these bands sort of, I don't know if they were necessarily, they declared themselves Christians, but there were traces of it in their music. I'm talking about The Call, for one, Big Country, I would put into this category as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another band I put in this category called The Alarm, the guy by the name of Mike Peters, that I really like as well. I like their 80s work too. I think the Alarm is really, or I'm sorry, The Call, excuse me, is really the best of that crop. And the album that drew me to them, as I was just listening to it online, really over the last year or so, they've got an album called Reconciled from 1986, that I think is really quietly one of the best albums of the 80s. I'll take it that far. A lot of people don't know this. Peter Gabriel sings backing vocals on the opening tune. He was a big advocate for them. When their first record came out, he asked them to open for him on the Shock the Monkey tour. So you know, when Peter Gabriel, right, when Peter Gabriel was really reaching sort of the height of his popularity in the early and mid '80s, he brought The Call on board and was always a strong advocate for them. And you can even hear probably a little bit of his influence on their music as well, I think.
Yeah.
They were from Oklahoma as well, which I found kind of interesting. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of those bands like The Alarm and Big Country, you know, they were from they're European bands. But yeah, the fact that they were producing the sound and also from Oklahoma, I found really interesting too. And
I had no idea.
I don't know if that's just sort of geographic stereotypes I'm making about Oklahoma.
If you said Oklahoma music to people nowadays, they would think of that like red dirt alternative country type of thing, which they are like 900 miles away from.
Yeah. Right. Or you think of that. I think that's probably the first thing that comes to mind because that's a whole scene. Or you think of the Flaming Lips, because to me that's like the most famous band of the last probably 20 years to come out of Oklahoma. Anyway, so yeah, if you guys haven't listened to that Call record in a while, I highly recommend it. It's it doesn't sound maybe as dated as it would have a few years ago, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that there's room for that sound still in popular music. And it's just really good musicianship, and all the songs are really tight. They've got a song on there called Oklahoma that's really good. There's a lot of he's got a lot of like sort of strife in his voice, you know, like there's something sort of burning, you know, inside of him. In my opinion, it's like he's Bono without like the self-importance Michael Biehn was of Bono.
I can see that.
Yeah. And U2 is a band that many people would throw into that grouping that I've listed, only they were the ones that became totally huge. And I'll say it, I enjoy all of those bands I just mentioned more than I do U2. And that's probably only because of what U2 sort of became, which is like this really sort of, in my opinion, bloated turd. So I don't like anything. I'm one of those.
Tell us what you really think, Dave.
Baby Beagles.
Yes. Yeah. So when I was listening to some of the Call today on RDO, and admittedly I'm really not terribly familiar. But what I immediately heard when I was listening to that was an obvious influence on Pearl Jam. I've never heard any parallels drawn. I don't know if they've ever covered them. I don't know if they've ever acknowledged the Call.
I agree with that.
But yeah, both vocally and musically, and even production wise, I heard of it's what sounds like a sound that influenced Pearl Jam quite a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they were one of
I can
those
see that.
bands where I think if they went back and listened to like the two radio hits, "Walls Come Down" and the "Let the Day Begin," which is like '87, I think. They're songs that people will hear them and be like, "Oh yeah, I remember that." They're definitely one of
Right.
those bands where I think people heard them, but they just kind of faded out of people's memory. And
Yeah.
I, the question is, why did that happen? But I don't know if maybe they were like a little too like vaguely religious for some rocky people or like new wave people,
Right.
and then weren't
Yeah.
enough religious for like the Amy Grant group being at that
Right.
time.
Right. Right.
But they were a really good band, and you got to at least go out on YouTube after you watch this and check out the video for "Let the Day Begin." It starts with him just rocking and rolling on a bass in the middle of the redwood forest.
Nice.
So
Nice.
Nice. Nice.
I,
Yeah.
I
His Go ahead, Levi. I'm
no,
sorry.
no, no, no. I was just gonna say that I remember hearing that song one time driving home from work, off a night shift on Fox on Abe FM, which is a station that literally will play anything in Springfield. And they were throwing a bone to the call, and I had never actually heard the song up until that time.
Nice.
And then I went back and listened to the first record, "The Walls Came Down" and stuff. And when you first mentioned it, you said, "Oh, I might. One of my choices might be The Call." At first, it wasn't clicking with me. In my head, I actually thought of The Alarm, as you mentioned. I pictured that record
Oh,
with the
okay.
drummer
Yeah.
boy on the cover, and I was like, "Oh, The Call." And then I was like, "Wait, no, that's not them." And I think a lot of people might do that with that band.
Yeah. Yeah. You would. You could. A lot of people. Those are interchangeable bands when they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
One last thing. About the call. That's sort of kind of a nice story with the music continuing on. Michael Bean's son is the leader of Black Rebel Motorcycle Club.
Uh
Hmm.
huh.
And Michael Bean actually died. He backstage at a Black
Yeah.
Rebel Motorcycle
that's awful.
Club show a few years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awful.
So that's awful. But because he was, I guess, sort of instrumental in his son's career too.
Sure.
You know, as
Wow.
far as
Yeah. Opening doors. I'm
parent
sure.
advice. Yeah.
Wow.
Right. And then I'm gonna go on YouTube. Maybe not tonight afterwards, but shortly thereafter. After he died, the Call got back together to do a reunion show, and then Michael Bean's kid,
Cool.
Black
The
Rebel
son,
Motorcycle
yeah. Nice.
Club, sat in on vocals or did the whole show actually on
Oh,
vocals.
nice.
So yeah, pretty cool stuff. So yeah, really smart band that doesn't probably get the credit that they deserve.
Mhm.
And if you haven't, for if people are listening out there, if you haven't checked out that record, or if you haven't checked that out in a long time, yeah, give it a listen. There's not a bad tune on that album.
Yeah. Nice.
So
Nice.
yeah, so Levi, I'm
Good
gonna
choice.
kick it over to you, man. I'm curious.
This was
to
a
hear
tough
this
one,
Yeah.
as we mentioned. I had to kind of. I mean, the first thing that popped in my head was American Miner, which I had talked about last episode, but then I thought that would be too easy. And so the second one that popped in my head was Doucette. But I can't say I know enough personally about Doucette to know why maybe what happened with him, But the
Right.
band
He's
I
still
ended
around.
up choosing. Yeah, I mean, I think he might play like county fairs and stuff, but
He's
At
Canadian.
one
He
time
plays
that-
like in Canada. Yeah.
yeah, at one time that guy had dinner plates of cocaine, man. So county fairs, dinner plates of cocaine. So,
Right.
but the band I chose is a band called, if you could see it, Junkyard.
Oh yeah.
And they were signed to Geffen Records in 1988, and it was literally like 6 months to a year after GNR had gotten signed. And they were considered a rock sleaze act, and kind of maybe a mix of like the Georgia Satellites and GNR, kind of a little bit together, kind of southern rocky, but they also still wanted to have like a Hollywood vibe to them. And
Yeah.
they put out that record I just showed you, their first record, and it is excellent. It's a blend of, like I said, southern rock and boozy rock and sleaze rock, and there's the prerequisite ballad, because I guess all sleaze bands have to have a ballad on their record as well. And a lot of the stories about what went down with that band And I guess before I mention that, I should mention they had a second record, and it's called Sixes, Sevens, and Nines. And Steve Earle actually contributed to this record.
Hmm.
And they did two records and basically two tours, and there was infighting within the band. One of the members, his name was Brian Baker. Before he was in Junkyard, he was in the band Minor Threat. So he had like a punk pedigree.
Yeah.
Hell of a transition.
I don't know. And the other guys in the band kind of seemed like hired hands because they recorded the album right before they fired a couple guys or right after. So it was like new guys were brought in to do the tour, and they just didn't gel over the course of those the two tours and the one album I guess the second group made. And that guitarist ended up leaving and being the guitarist for Bad Religion.
Yeah, Brian Baker is the guitarist for Bad Religion. Yeah.
And I always thought listening to those two records that you could just hear the potential in them. And as I mentioned, I don't know what the downfall was, besides I know that it was a lot of kind of hired hands type of situation. And they just couldn't get it together. They made a third record. It never got released. Geffen dropped them. And a lot of people said that Geffen never really kind of gave them the push they needed. Like, Geffen kind of had Guns N' Roses in the pocket and was basically using all the money, all the resources on Guns N' Roses, which I can't blame them. Guns N' Roses is a better band than Jungle. I'll say that every day of the week. But I will say that these guys were a really good label mate, and if they could have, if somehow the two bands could have gotten their egos together, a Junkyard GNR tour, I think, would have been huge. I mean, I'm surprised.
Or if Izzy Stradlin would have joined Junkyard, man, after he left GNR.
Something. And that's another thing. The guitarist, the main guitarist there, his name was Chris Gates, and he's later gone on and he's had a band in Austin, Texas for a while, and he's never been able to recreate the magic he had with Junkyard. The same thing with the lead singer. And so around the year, I think it's like 2000, 2001, they actually kind of reformed. And they've been playing like one-offs basically over the last 15 years. And so it's just sad to see, what could have been, because you can go and watch, they have videos for a couple of the songs off that first record, and they just look like a really cool band, and they were having a really good time. And the songs are, some of them are cheesy, hokey, but Guns N' Roses had cheesy, hokey songs too, So he's, but some of the lyrics wise, I mean,
right.
But I felt like they kind of peaked by, they got on Geffen, which was a huge accomplishment at that time. If you could get signed to Geffen, because they were the biggest rock label at that time. And they made that first record, and the first record sold. I mean, I don't know if it went gold, but I mean, there were people, they made videos, they were on MTV. I think they did either, not Headbangers Ball, but the other rock shows that were on MTV at the time. They got a little bit of press, and they had a little bit of a following, but they could never put it together.
No.
Yeah. Also, I mean, timing, the first record was released in 89. It's two Geffen artists. They're sandwiched between Guns N' Roses and Nirvana. You know what I mean, as far as what that year is.
Yeah, yeah.
So they were probably, if they probably were forgotten about.
Oh yeah, quickly. I'm sure
they were more Guns N' Roses.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure as soon as Nirvana dropped, Geffen dumped all those bands. I mean, besides Guns N' Roses, obviously, because they had to fill the roster with grunge and alternative, which, that's just the changing of the guard.
Yeah,
sure. It's shaking of the tree. Yeah. For the better in most cases, but as I get older, I appreciate sort of the whole timeline of it all.
Exactly.
Anyway, yeah, I like it. I like it both. I like my Guns N' Roses, and I like my Mudhoney. That's how I roll. Anyway, Jonathan, what about you?
Speaking of Geffen, these guys eventually signed with Geffen, and unfortunately, their infatuation with Geffen was part of their downfall. The Stone Roses,
Yeah.
and this record, self-titled, originally released on Silvertone, is awesome. I mean, I don't think you could ask for any better record to come out in, what was it, '89.
Way ahead of its time.
Oh, totally,
Absolutely.
totally,
Yeah.
and still like really timeless in many ways. Granted, I wasn't sitting around waiting for this band to release a second record because I wasn't really listening to music yet in 1989 and 1990. Yeah, so I mean, they released this record. Geez, they had been a band since like '83 or something, and ultimately released this album. It's part of the Manchester movement, and that would ultimately, obviously, influence bands like Gomez. But then they wanted to get out of that label, and essentially like were handcuffed and couldn't do anything for several years. And the Second Coming, their second album, The Second Coming, was released a few years later, but by then,
94, I think.
yeah, 94. I mean, so geez, 5 years. I mean, I'm not to say that they weren't writing the music in between, but you just lose momentum. It's inevitable. And so much music, even though it is timeless, it's also in some ways, it's a time and a place when it comes to capturing the vibe that is created in the music.
Yeah.
And that just kind of like passed them over, I think in some ways. Right. But the Second Coming is solid, but it's hard to live up to that first record. And I'm not a guy that says that lightly. I seldom like first albums more than the rest of the artist's catalog. Sure. I like the artist maturing and the production value maturing and things like that. And not saying it gets slick, but they find their production value, which I mentioned in the last episode. But I felt like the Stone Roses were a little too cognizant of maybe of the production value of the Second Coming. And maybe a little too slick to use the S word that is thrown around a lot, but and they just couldn't sustain it. Granted, they had a reunion a few years ago, playing a handful of shows, that's cool.
Did you hear any? Did anybody watch any of that footage of their reunion gigs?
No, but they did a documentary
like
on it, I think, or something.
Yeah,
a little rough.
A little rough. Yeah, a little rough. Yeah. The band sounded okay. Ian, his voice live just hasn't really matured that well.
Yeah.
The buzz around it was pretty huge over there. Like they played like all these huge European festivals.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like all three of us, sounds like all three of us like this album. We didn't get into it probably until I didn't really get into them until probably the last few years. I don't know. I discovered this.
Till I worked at a record store.
Yeah.
Right. I'd heard Second Coming when it came out when I was in high school, and there was that Love Spreads song, which was the single off that. I thought it was kind of a ripper, but probably I would say 6-7 years ago, somebody somewhere turned me on to the first record. I was like, I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is really unique sound. The reunion shows though were a little rough. I don't know if I don't know. You kind of it makes you wonder just obviously they need money. I mean, I don't fault them for getting back together. We all got bills to pay, and they they haven't they haven't really I know what's his name player plays with Primal Scream. Yeah, no, the bass player.
No,
I forgot his name.
John Squire.
Yeah. I think he plays a Primal Scream, I think, too. Or he does now. But anyway. Good choices. Good choices
Yeah.
all around, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. And if you ask anybody British who's like a little bit older than us, they were at the altar of that first record.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
like it's their 10. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Or their like seriously, like ask anybody British age like 33 to like 45. It was like it was such part of the musical canon for them for that era.
Yeah.
Just everybody. Yeah. Anyway, so I want to talk about the cards now. I want to switch to our final topic. All of us collected baseball cards. In the mainly, I'm going to guess the bulk of our collecting years were probably about 86, 87 to 92.
Yeah,
probably was
the
bulk of those are my heavy card years, probably for all of us here. That was before cards. In my opinion, there too many brands were introduced. I think
oversaturation.
The market got a little bit too saturated. Yeah. Yeah, it's like you needed more than Topps, but you didn't need more than like the 5. You know.
Yeah, and even that was, did you really need?
Did you really
score?
need 5? Yeah.
Yeah, did you really need 5? Right. One question before we begin this. One question before we begin this. Like, Fleer or Score? Who makes better cards? I say Score.
Fleer.
I was gonna say Score.
Fleer? Really? See, because I think if there's a weak link within the 5, it's got to be Fleer to me.
Really?
They were never really great looking cards. No.
I think they age better. Fleer does in some ways. I won't defend 89 Fleer.
Maybe.
I'll defend like 86 and 87 Fleer, maybe even like 84 Fleer.
You're going back now.
Yeah, but like
the
91 Score got a little.
The early Fleer did look better than the later Fleer cards, but they'll always have the Billy Ripken card, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah. Fuckface Eternal, man.
Supposedly, the real story behind that is he had to be like he was in the dugout or something, and he had to grab a bat to do the photo really fast, and he just like grabbed one from the rack, and he wrote that on the end of his bats because he knew no one else would grab them.
Yep. I've heard that. Which we need to have Tom Blankenship on for my morning jacket, as he recently tweeted a photo of that card. So a call out to Tom Blankenship.
Nice.
Cool. Levi, I want to hear your card now then. I want you to reveal
this
your
card is the first single I ever got. And I mean, I had bought, packs and wax packs and rack packs and the old quarter machines where you put your quarters in, pull it out, get like 2 cards, remember? In between the cardboard there would be a couple basic cards.
Oh yeah.
But the first actual like single at a show or a card store I ever got, it was across the street from Wrigley Field at a little shop that sold Cub stuff and baseball memorabilia. And I don't know if you could see, but I'm going to show it as best I can. It's Bob Uecker.
Wow, nice.
Woo.
It's a 1967 Bob Uecker, and he's on the Phillies. And I just always had liked Bob Uecker as a kid from Major League and the Miller Lite commercials, and just, I always thought he was just really funny. He would be on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson sometimes, and I saw this card in that shop and was like, I have to have that, Dad. I have to. And I think if I remember right, it was like $18 or $20. My dad's like, oh, that's the most expensive baseball card ever or something. And it's like, no, Dad, that is not the most expensive baseball card ever. But it means a lot to me. And I just, at this era of Topps, there was always little cartoons at the top with like little stats and, quotes. I think this is hilarious. It says, Bob is one of the best defensive catchers in the major leagues and possesses a rifle-throwing arm. and I just know that Bob Uecker would be the first to tell you that none of that is true.
You get a kick out of
that. So that's my card.
Nice. Well done.
I went to a Brewers game like 10 years ago, and I saw him because it was Bob Euchre night.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, I got to, and he was like very like he would be announcing, like because like I don't know if you guys have been to Miller Park. They've got it's sort of like a mezzanine level that like has like it's walled, you know what I mean? It's not exposed. It's like a mezzanine level. You walk in, and you can walk around the whole mezzanine level, and they've got like specialty shops and like better food and stuff.
It's where they sell the High Life.
It's where they sell the High Life, right? Yeah, and they Euchre walks through there, and like I'm like, holy shit! I'm like, Bob, what's going on? He's like, hey everybody, thanks for coming out, and then he walked into the elevator.
That's classic Bob
Yeah,
Euchre.
I was like, they
Always
just delivered
on.
it just like an announcer would. Yeah, always on.
Nice.
Yeah, always. Good choice, man. Just gosh, yeah, that guy. That guy's a real. I hate. It's probably an overused term, but he's a real treasure. That guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I hear he's getting a second statue at Miller Park, actually.
Nice.
Seriously, I don't know the details, but I heard he's getting a second one.
Wow.
Yeah, you are a treasure if you have multiple statues
I'm gonna have
at
to
the
tell the
stadium.
Cubs they're gonna have to build 2 more Harry Carey statues.
Yeah.
Damn.
Oh, all right, Jonathan. Your card revealed.
Yeah, so I was going a bit on the theme, just a bit of fast starts, but couldn't sustain it.
Okay.
However, this guy actually bucks that trend a little bit, and it's kind of forgotten. And I don't mean to go easy pickings on the first card reveal, but I had to do this. This card means a lot to me for several reasons. But it's the 88 Donruss Greg Jeffries.
Oh, nice.
This card was extremely hard to come by in 88. It was a high card. It's a card number 657, so it was harder to get the high cards for some reason.
Yeah.
Is like the extended set.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
But I remember my brother bought me an entire box of 88 Donruss for my birthday. It probably would have been my 9th birthday, so 89. And with the hopes of getting this one card, and I did not get it in the entire box. But nevertheless, I still have a copy. Actually, my brother's copy, and saw it in an antique store the other day as well. In a set, there was a set of 88 Donruss where I just rifled through it just to find the Greg Jeffries and touch it and put it back. And they wanted like $12 for that set, and I would know it. This card, I don't know, maybe it maxed out at like $9 value. It's probably worth like $1.50 now. But Jeffries had such a hot start too. And just the New York press was really hard on him, I guess. But and that was 89, 90, and eventually, I mean, he made 2 All-Star games with the Cardinals. In 93, 94.
A lot of people forget he had kind of like a second career with them.
Yeah. So I mean, he bucks that trend where he did. He had a solid career. I was on. Apparently, he has a baseball academy out in California, and so he's running that. And
so obviously we have our spring break trip for next year.
Yes, I think so.
Greg Jeffries fantasy camp.
But his bio on the website goes out of its way to mention that he was in fact nominated for the Hall of Fame. At one point, he did get a vote apparently for the Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Famer in the Getz household.
Great card. I always loved that era of Donruss, the 80s Donruss.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a relatively famous card, I think, for people for kids who collected in that era.
The brand Panini, who makes cards, they originally got popular making like soccer cards. They bought Donruss out, and they have come out with 2014 Donruss, and they look like the early 80s Donruss.
Oh, seriously? Awesome.
And they have Diamond Kings, and I want to get, they have an Anthony Rizzo one, and the Diamond Kings are the first era Diamond Kings, where they have the red, white, and blue banners on them and stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, nice. So I definitely want to pick up that set of Diamond Kings.
Dude, that's cool because I thought that Topps had the monopoly on producing baseball cards.
Just like within the last year or two, Panini bought out Donruss and had been like trying to get him back onto the scene.
Awesome.
That's great.
Very cool. Yeah, good selection, man. You know what? Mine, like I said, I don't have it handy, but I can describe it in detail. I was going through all my cards because I've been preparing a room for another human being who's going to be entering my household in 4 or 5 weeks, and I was looking through all my cards, which was very, very sentimental and nice. You know, it was nice to just kind of go through all the cards that you saved, and I came across I have 4 of them. And I'm embarrassed to say, as a baseball fan, I don't remember this guy at all. But the card that I have is an All-Star. He was on the All-Star team in 1985. And, the name just did not ring a bell at all. It is Damaso Garcia's 1986 Topps All-Star card. He was on the Blue Jays, right? He's a Dominican guy. Sort of long face. You could Google the image right now and it would come up. But I had no idea the name. I mean, I didn't even know the name. I remember. I kind of remember the card vaguely as a kid. Yeah, listen to this, Damaso Garcia, right? I'm like, okay, who is this person? I have 4 of his All-Star cards, right? He came into the league in 78, so he was already, by 1985, veteran player. Nearly all of his career was spent with Toronto. He got 4th place Rookie of the Year in 1980. The dude got MVP votes in 82 and 85, that year that All-Star card would reflect. So, MVP votes. Granted, he was way down the list, but he still got votes.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 All-Star, and then also in 82, Silver Slugger Award as well.
Nice.
In 82. Dude, killer line in 82. 310 batting average, 338 OBP, slugging of 399, OPS of 737. He wasn't a power hitter by any means, but speed guy, 54 stolen bases in 82.
Nice.
Like I said, hit 310. Didn't really strike out all that much. So Damaso Garcia, wow. I was totally up. I had no idea who the guy was. Wow. I remember the card. The card brought back some memories for me. And it was one of the cards where I had many duplicates, but I just had no idea who this guy was. And I looked up the numbers. And I was like, holy shit, this guy, wasn't able to sustain it, but 283 career hitter. And also, put up 2 MVP caliber seasons. So Damaso Garcia, he's
I'm surprised there's not a Diamond King of him from that era.
Right. He just seems like
they gave one to Cal Daniels, man.
Yeah, it seems like he would have the Diamond King's qualities,
Right?
Diamond Kings often were guys that weren't the best player on the team. Right. They were a guy who contributed, certainly. But your Diamond Kings is going to be the sort of an unsung hero type, or somebody who made some type of contribution that season that wasn't, Robin Yount or George Brett.
The 1990 Cubs Diamond King was Mike Bielecki.
Right. I mean, I think all of those good players that I just mentioned, all those really franchise guys from that decade, eventually had Diamond Kings, but that's not what the DK was about. All right, so,
unsung heroes, man.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow, good choice, Gabe. Obscure, man, going deep.
Yeah. I was
going
say,
deep.
digging in the crates.
Well, I got duplicates, so I might send you guys some Damaso Garcia cards in the mail.
Nice.
But anyway, on that note, I think that's going to close it out, boys. Another episode in the history books. So I thank you. and I think we are better people for it. So,
Good night.
to quote Bill Walton. Anyway, so yes. All right. Well, I will see you guys soon, and we'll get cracking on episode 3.
Sounds good.
Rock and roll,
All
Shin-Soo
right,
Choo.
boys.